If you're anything like me, you probably have a bit of anxiety when it comes to actually releasing a project into the world. What will people think, or did you do the best you could have? And all that second guessing and doubt can sometimes lead to full-on paralysis. Or to put it another way, you just don't finish your film because it's never good enough. And while that kind of fear is really common, it's a filmmaker's worst enemy when it comes to growing their career. So this video is all about killing that fear with 3 simple strategies that will actually work. So this video is going to be all about tactics you can use to overcome your own creative fears and actually get your work out there. But before I really dive in here, let me just give you a quick personal story about why I'm making this video in the first place. I've been a professional cinematographer and director for over 10 years now, and before that I was a full-time photojournalist, so I've made 100% of my living by capturing the real world and its stories with a camera for most of my adult life. Logically, that should mean I've gotten really good at pushing through roadblocks, but for the last year or so, I've been caught in this epic cycle of procrastination mixed with doubt, and it stopped me from sharing some work that really should have been done by now. And considering I promised Audiio, the sponsor of today's video, that it was going to be done last year, it's starting to become a bit of an issue. Now that probably sounds all really vague, so let me explain. Last February, like last year, as in 2023, not the February from 6 months ago, I got a micro grant from my friends over at Art of Documentary Films to go out and shoot a film about a surfer named Jose who lost 3 of his limbs in an IED blast in Iraq. It was just enough money for me and 2 friends to fly to San Diego for 4 days and see what we could get. So we did as much pre-planning as we could, and then we went down and shot like crazy, and even though it wasn't a lot of production time, things went great. A few months after that, I had a rough edit banged out, which my co-director Eros was mostly happy with, I think, and it seemed like we were pretty much ready to polish it up and get it out into the world. But that was more than a year ago now, and it obviously wasn't released, so the question then becomes, what the hell went wrong? Well, the short version is that I didn't listen to my own advice. I've said a bunch of times on this channel that real filmmakers finish films, but for over 18 months, I wasn't able to finish my own. Not only was that disrespectful of my friend's time, who came out and crewed for me at a super discounted rate, it's also not fair to Jose, who opened up with us and shared his story with the expectation that we were actually going to do something with it.
Doctors were coming in and out of my room because they couldn't believe that they were actually able to save me.
Now I did eventually get my act together, and the project is finally going to be released next week on this channel, and I think it turned out really well in the end. We're going to do some breakdowns on the channel and also a whole bunch more deep dives as part of my documentary cinematography course. FYI, the early bird discount sale starts in 2 weeks, so get your name on the wait list right now to save 10%. But all plugs aside, the reasons why I got so stuck for so long and how I managed to ultimately push through are really good learning examples for filmmakers at all different levels of experience. Okay, so what happened? Well, like I said, the short film has been pretty much done now for ages, and the version you'll all get to see on Monday is only slightly different than the edit I had done in November of last year. A bit more polished for sure, but at its core, it's more or less the same thing. I was honestly ready to release the thing back then, but then the classic filmmaker's problem hit. I got one little round of critical feedback and it derailed me completely. And I won't even say it was negative feedback, because it wasn't. It was actually really positive feedback from people who I trust, who just sort of felt that the film wasn't as strong as it could be if we added more verite moments and maybe reorganized the structure. And honestly, I pretty much agreed with all of it, but there was just one problem. We didn't have that footage to make that kind of edit work, and with a full other feature film in post-production and an insanely busy shooting schedule as a full-time DP for hire, I just didn't have the time to go back out and re-edit the thing. And because I knew I wasn't going to be re-editing or reshooting anything, I knew that whatever I exported would be imperfect, and so I did the worst thing possible, nothing. And that's a great segue into the first takeaway from this project, because perfectionism can be a real killer in this business, especially when you're just starting. I mean, I clearly can still get frozen by perfectionism after 15 years of working in media, so keep that in mind when you're getting nervous about sharing stuff. It's happening to everyone. You just have to be okay with the fact that things are almost never going to turn out exactly as you want them to. Your projects are going to have flaws, things will go wrong, and for 99% of us, the finished product is going to be imperfect in some way, even if you're the only one who notices. And if you want to get anywhere, you're just going to have to kick that perfectionism out of the way, because a project on a a hard drive, even if it's like 99% done, is the same thing as having made nothing at all. Now, luckily, there was one stress-free area of this film when it came to the post-production, and that was the music, because we were able to source 100% of the music we needed from Audiio, the sponsor of this video and a longtime friend of this channel. If you've never heard of them, Audiio provides high-quality, royalty-free music and sound effects for filmmakers and content creators at probably the best price point out there. And just to be clear, there was no obligation or contract for me to use Audiio music on this, but there just wasn't really any need to keep looking. I originally planned to hire a composer actually, but when I started the rough cut and I was dropping in audio tracks to see how they fit the vibe of the edit, pretty quickly I realized that the music was already working well, so I just ran with it, and in the end, the whole film is scored start to finish using royalty-free tracks that viewers of this channel can get access to for just $59 a year by using the link in the description and the code Luke70, which is sort of an insane price. I won't spend too much more time here because we kind of all know what these services do, but the fact that I could find genuinely good music that I'll never get sued for from a service that's about the same price for a year as a month of Creative Cloud is kind of wild. Enough said, but if you need music for your edits, use the link below and the code Luke70 to save 70%. Okay, back to the video. I know what I was just saying before the ad read made it seem like I don't like the short we made, so just to be totally clear, I'm actually very proud of this thing. It might sound like I'm setting the stage for some total disaster, but the reality is that I think it turned out great. The problem that it has from a structural standpoint, it's still there, and if I had a time machine, I'd love to go back and do some things differently, but that doesn't mean I think it's bad. Actually, quite the opposite. For starters, it looks great, considering how stripped down our crew and our gear package was, at least in my humble opinion. Plus, Jose is an amazing character whose story is very inspiring, and all around it's just a very cool little short. Is it gonna win Sundance? No chance. But when I step back and ask myself whether our goal was to get out and shoot and tell the story of an incredible guy in the best way we could, or if it was to impress my colleagues and win awards, it seems silly to have stalled for so long. Now obviously we all want both things. Awards are nice, and the better the film, the more awards it wins, and the more it wins, the more likely it is that the story had an emotional impact on audiences, which I guess means it had a bigger overall impact on the world, right? On top of that, because of my work as a DP on some pretty big budget docs and working with some incredibly talented people over the years, I've sort of been trained to be a doc snob. Like if you look at the films that do usually win the awards, they're almost always very heavy on the verite and focused on capital S serious subject matter. Think of like Matt Heineman projects that win all the festivals and go on to stream on HBO or wherever. But not every project is going to be that, and it's obviously completely unrealistic for me to want my little 4-day shoot to turn out like The Trade, which took years to complete and involved multiple crews running around in different countries. But that's exactly what my lizard brain was telling me after hearing a bit of critical feedback, and in response, I did the worst thing possible and shelved it. The takeaway here is that we can't let perfectionism win and stop us from sharing, because it just basically means we're afraid of what other people will say. Totally natural, but crippling for a creative professional. And that ties in nicely with the next takeaway from this whole experience, and really any creative project in general, because even though I've been doing this process for so many years, I'm clearly still struggling with it. I mean, it'd be one thing if this was my first film ever, but between photography and documentary filmmaking, it's been like 15 years now, and here we are worrying about perfectionism with a film that we shot in just 4 days, and, in my humble opinion anyways, actually turned out well. I mean, just imagine how much worse the stress would be if it went badly. When you get in this fear-based perfectionist mindset, you're going to see flaws everywhere, and no matter how hard you work, you're never gonna be able to get them all out. I've never been a part of a documentary shoot where every single thing went as planned, and every director I've ever met has had to live with a few things that weren't quite as good as they imagined them in their head. So if you accept that there will be things that aren't perfect with every project you make, you're left with two choices. Either you can let those issues freeze you into doing nothing, or you can finish the project anyways, learn, and move on. Like, if you can stay clear-headed enough to really study what you made, then you can make adjustments and make sure that no matter what happens, the next film you make is just a little bit better. If you never finish it though, you're gonna be caught in perpetual standby mode, and a bunch of files sitting on your hard drive won't help you very much. You're gonna be able to decide for yourself how it turned out when I upload it next week, but I made this video to be honest, so I'll just straight up tell you what I think went wrong with Highline. I really wish we had more verite. If you don't know what I mean by verite, basically I'm just saying I wish we had more story points that unfolded live on camera rather than just hearing Jose explain them in the interview. Like in pure verite, the audience watches as things happen to the characters live as they happen in real life, so you feel like you're on the journey with them instead of listening to them tell you about it later. And we did get some solid verite stuff, but in general we had to lean on the voiceover and the interview track a lot more than I would have liked. But then of course it was kind of realistic to think we were going to get insane verite moments about a surfer in just 4 random days in the winter, so rationally it makes no sense to somehow be shocked that it didn't happen. But when it comes to our own work, being rational is really hard. Part of my justification for waiting so long to release the thing was that I thought maybe we could get back down to San Diego and get a bit more footage to fix some of these issues, but really, that was just a stalling tactic. This was never meant to be a long-term project, and waiting for footage that was never gonna come was just me refusing to accept reality and get back to work. And by the way, if you want to go deeper into the mechanics of how to shoot a verite scene well, then you'll definitely want to grab that early bird discount on the cinematography course, because that's one of the things I spend a lot of time on in the scene coverage unit. The doors only open twice a year, and if you missed this intake, it's going to be closed until next year, so check out the link if you're into this kind of thing. Now, the last takeaway I want to pass on here is one that's so universal I almost feel stupid for messing this up. When we started planning this shoot, there was a very clear window of time when my schedule and my co-director Eros' schedule and Jose's schedule all lined up, so it was easy to make plans and get on the plane. Then when we all got back, we were all fired up about the footage we captured, so I started editing right away and got all the footage ingested and the dailies cut down and did all that stuff pretty quick. So far, so good. We even set a tentative date for exporting the final film because it was supposed to play at a film festival in 2023, and that date kept us moving forward. Now, the festival didn't happen in the end, but for all those first stages of the project, things got done and we made real progress. Can you see why? I'm just gonna say it. Deadlines. When you have a clear deadline, everyone is on the same page and our little monkey brains can work towards it. We knew we had to be on that plane at a certain time, and that's a deadline. That film festival deadline we were working towards, also a deadline. But where things went off the rails is when we eventually got the edit about 90% of the way done and we were ready to polish it up and export it, but then we got some critical feedback, like I said, and the film was pulled from the festival. That removed all of our deadlines, and once they were gone, we fell apart and just kind of did nothing. While all of this was happening, my feature documentary that I directed and shot went into post-production, and I was spending like 6 hours a day in front of an edit suite on that. Then I got hired as a DP on another big project shooting in 4 countries, and I was suddenly on the road a lot. More and more stuff comes up, as it always does, and before I knew it, Highline had been bumped so far down the priorities list that I didn't even open the timeline for like 6 months. That's what a lack of deadlines will do to a project. Like if we just picked a new date and went for it, this film would have been out months ago. But we didn't, and so it wasted away on my hard drive until a couple of weeks ago when I finally got overcome with guilt and set a new deadline next week. Now, when I wrote the outline for this video, the film wasn't done, and as I record this video now, it's still not fully done. But I'm still declaring the deadline publicly because that's gonna make sure I actually do what I say I'm gonna do. So if you're like me and struggle not to put things off, you need to find a way to set deadlines that have stakes. Announce them publicly, put money on the line, tell your YouTube audience they'll all come after you if you don't do it. Whatever you gotta do to create accountability and set clear deadlines. Because no matter how many little tiny flaws I might see in this project, it is coming out next week no matter what, and that's a good thing because Jose's story deserves it. So don't be like me, please. I really love this project. I think it looks amazing, and I think Jose's story needs all the exposure it can get. Ultimately, we'd love to help him find a sponsor and go after his dream of surfing pipeline in Hawaii, but that can't happen unless we actually follow through and share something. So if you're somehow connected to Billabong or Hurley or a company like that, hit me up. But for the filmmakers I made this video for, I hope you'll check it out next week and let me know what you think. Filmmaking is always tough, but if you remember that your film will never be perfect, you can learn from it and keep going and keep getting better. But you owe it to yourself, your crew, and especially your subjects to finish what you start. So set deadlines, embrace the imperfect, and actually finish stuff. And if you're into taking your cinematography seriously this year, just one final reminder that there's only 2 weeks until the doors open for the last time this year, so if you want to get in early and save some cash, get on the wait list ASAP. See ya!
The first day I was out at the beach, people were staring at me, watching me crawl through the beach and stuff like that. But when I got in the water...
Ready? Yeah, it's ready.
I looked like everybody else.